Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment of Beards and Cars. For those who maybe haven't tuned into an episode before, this is a podcast style series where we discuss a number of deeper, broader, wider subjects in a much more in-depth way than, say, a 7 or 8 minute video could. It could be a countdown, could be a discussion about, say, predictions for certain games, etc. It could pretty much be literally anything. And on this particular occasion, I'm actually leading on directly from last week's episode, which was of course my personal top 10 favourite driving or racing games that I've ever played. And incidentally, just on that point quickly, there is one game that I forgot to feature in my honourable mentions that I really wish I had, because it is one of my favourite driving games ever. I don't know why I forgot about it, and that is The Simpsons Hit and Run. That is an outstandingly fun game. I can't believe I forgot to include that, but it definitely deserved a place. I really love that game. As far as this week though, it's a similar concept. Once again, it's my personal pick of a top 10 favourites within the gaming world, and of course the opportunity is more than there for you guys down below to slap your lists. In fact, to be honest, I'd be very interested to know what many of you guys' selections and preferences are within this kind of category, because although the vast majority of content that we do on this channel is of course driving or racing or otherwise motor related, be it cars or bikes, there are plenty of other games beyond that which many of us do play. Now, for many years I was exclusively a racing gamer. I had no interest in anything else, but then I actually did start playing other things as well. And I'm not saying that I never played other games when I was a kid. I certainly did. In fact, some of the ones on this list were from pretty much exclusively when I was a kid, actually, but my main focus was always racing, and to some degree it still is, but I definitely have other games that I like to unwind with, because most of the time that I spend on racing games these days, to be honest, tends to be because of YouTube. I'm either preparing for a video or recording one. That's most of the time, whereas I like to just play other games, just to relax, to unwind, to have a bit of traditional fun. So, with all of that being said, this is a much broader potential list than it is for driving or racing, because of course it could include literally anything on any platform. So first of all, I'm going to give a quick shout out to one game which didn't quite make my top 10, purely because I've never actually played it myself. I love the game because I've seen it played all the way through, but I've never actually done it myself, and that is Shadow of the Colossus. I love this game. I first saw it because I watched PewDiePie play through it. I was a big fan of him playing through those full games back in the day, you know, when he actually played games, that is. But it looks like an awesome game. I actually, funnily enough, do own it, the remastered one on the PS4. It's literally sitting right next to my TV, but I've never even booted it up. Because, again, I don't have that much time to be playing like half of the games that I own, let alone fully completing them. But it's definitely worthy of a mention. I love the game, it's gorgeous, it's well made. So we won't get fully into that one, but as far as the top 10 itself goes, I'm going to kick off first of all with a pick which is certainly not an obvious one, and some of these games I don't actually have personal footage from, so I'll have to use some trailer footage, and that one is Croc. But in particular the first one, Croc Legend of the Gobbos. A lot of you guys probably haven't ever played this, maybe never even heard of it. But basically it's a PS1 era game. It's a little adventure game where you play as, spoiler alert, a crocodile, and it's kind of like the less successful sibling to the Sonics and the Marios and the Spyros, that kind of thing. But I actually like Croc more than all of those. I loved this game as a kid, and I will be honest, most of the reason why it's here, which might be strange to have a game like this featured, is because of that nostalgia. This was one of my favourite games as a kid, and apart from Gran Turismo 2, which I also played a lot at the time, and also Ducati World, these were pretty much my top 3. Gran Turismo 2, Ducati World, and Croc were the 3 games that I played the most as a kid. So, for me, nostalgia alone makes it worthy of a place here. Next up in 9th place, I'm putting a game which I've mentioned a couple of times on the channel, and I did actually plan to do a full playthrough of it on the PlayStation 2, but I just never got around to it, and that is Marvel's The Punisher game. And this is far more violent than most of the movie versions of the Punisher. I haven't seen the TV series, but I hear that's pretty intense. And of course, Punisher Warzone was hyper-violent as well. That's my favourite version so far that I've seen of the Punisher. Again, haven't seen the series though. So the game basically follows the same essential concept with Jigsaw and the backstory and all that kind of stuff, but it plays through in more of a missions setup where you go through like a dozen missions which get gradually bigger and more intense rather than just a simple fluid story. And the missions are based around Frank Castle, aka of course the Punisher, retelling these mission reports in a police interrogation room, but you play through them almost like they're memories, which I think is a pretty cool way of doing it. There's twists and turns through the game, but really at its core, it's just a hyper-violent arcade-style, infinitely replayable, for me at least, bit of fun. And I also like that even though it is hyper-violent, the game does a good job of keeping the reins on the character, because he's not evil at the end of the day. He kills people because that's the most efficient form of justice, because as far as he's concerned, that is the best way. So you can choose to be hyper-violent towards certain individuals, like slamming ladders down through people's faces or putting a drill through their head, and you can do that, but at the same time you actually lose points in the game for doing so. So I kind of like that. The game allows you to do that if you want to, but you get adversely affected by doing it. I think that's a cool payoff. It encourages you to actually not be hyper-violent. Next up in 8th place, I'm putting another game which you probably wouldn't expect to be here. It's another one which, in a similar way to last week, Road Trip Adventure, looks a little bit too childish for a guy who's 24, like I am, to have on a top 10 list. But the reason why is actually, funnily enough, for the exact same reason why I had Road Trip Adventure, and that is it looks like a child game, but to play it well, you actually need to be smarter than a kid. And this game is a perfect example of that, which is Theme Park World, sometimes called Theme Park. And the concept of the game is pretty obvious. It's fairly simple. You build theme parks to bring in money, keep the customer satisfaction high, all that kind of stuff. And I like this version of the game because it has the brighter, more vivid colours, more of a cartoon style. And the reason why I think I appreciate brighter coloured games more is because I actually do have a colour vision deficiency, red-green. So brighter colours do more for me. So that's probably why I like this version more than the slightly more realistic, say, Roller Coaster Tycoons and those kind of games. But I love one thing in particular about this game that really highlights how non-childish it is, and that is that you can place sideshow attractions in a theme park, and people can win prizes, basically. They have to pay to use it, and then you can set the percentage chance of them winning a prize. But the reason why I love it is that the game is so accurate to real life in terms of screwing people over, because as long as you place the value of the prize high enough, you can put a 0% chance of winning, and the people will still be satisfied to play the game. That is so accurate to real life, it's actually kind of disturbing. And I love that. That single-handedly shows it's not a child's game. You need to understand commerce, money flow, that kind of stuff, business management, far more than a kid would, to actually get the most out of the game. It's a lot of fun. I can put this game on right now on the PlayStation 3, because of course you can run PS1 games on that, and have a ton of fun, just like you can see I am in this video. Next up, a game which has always been one of my absolute favourites, Tony Hawk's Underground 2. I know a lot of people prefer the first Underground game. It has more of a traditional story to it, but I just love Underground 2 because of the more kind of jackass vibe that it has with the world tour. There's lots of banter, it's very over the top and ridiculous, and I like that. You can do stuff in the game which is just physically impossible from a skating point of view, but I've always loved the Tony Hawk games. As a franchise, they've actually been part of my life for at least as long as Gran Turismo has, so it's been a very important thing for me, and although I have no interest in skating in real life, I absolutely love the Tony Hawk games. And for me, the all-out wackiness of Underground 2 is just so infinitely replayable, and speaking to that, I've probably played through story mode at least a dozen times, probably more actually. It's probably close to 20 times over the years. It's that enjoyable, and you can actually burn through the whole story within a day pretty easily. So tons of fun, very replayable, and it's just funny as well. It's a cool all-round experience. Next up in 6th place, is there any surprise that this game's going to be here? The Thing on the PS2. Of course this game was going to be on the list because it's the sequel and it's based on the property that is my favourite movie of all time. I'm a huge horror fan, especially monster movies, and The Thing from John Carpenter is my favourite movie ever. I have tons of memorabilia from it, toys, posters, games, all that kind of stuff, and I think that this actually makes a really good sequel to the movie. John Carpenter himself actually cameos in the game as a character, and the story, although a lot more convoluted than the movie, I think actually is a pretty cool sequel. In fact, it's at least as good as some of the graphic novel sequels to the movie as well. If you haven't played it, the graphics don't hold up amazingly well, and yet the atmosphere of the game, the dread, the eeriness actually does hold up. The lighting is really good, the weapons are interesting, the enemies are very cool and very formidable as well. It's a ton of fun. I've never actually completed the whole thing though. Of course I did do a playthrough, like 30 episodes on the channel, but I never actually completed the game because at the time I was using an Elgato and it broke. So I might get around to that eventually, but for now, I love the game, I love the property, certainly worthy of a place on the list. Moving up into the top 5 now, I'm kicking off with Alice Madness Returns, and this is a relatively underappreciated game because although people who have played it tend to really like it, there are a lot of people who never have. Plus it doesn't help that it's very rare. This game is kind of like Test Drive Unlimited, where you don't really see that many copies of it for sale because people who buy it tend to keep it more. But if you do get the chance to play Alice Madness Returns it's on PS3 and Xbox 360, I think. It might be on PC as well, I'm not sure. It's definitely on the PS3 though, and for someone like me with my sensibilities and my enjoyment in games, it's perfect. I'm a huge fan of the Alice in Wonderland kind of style, like top hats and canes and pocket watches, combined with steampunk, because essentially the story to this game is, as the name suggests, Alice goes back to Wonderland, but this is not a child's game. And I know I said that about Croc and about especially Road Trip Adventure and Theme Park, but I mean it literally. This is not a child's game. It's like an R-rated game. It's got some very adult content in it, including language. Not really the violence, that's kind of fantasy, like Zelda kind of violence, but more so the language, the kind of conversations that the adults have, and ultimately what the story turns out to be is very, very non-family friendly, let's just say. But if you do like fantasy games, if you like horror to some degree, but more so kind of steampunk fantasy, it's outstanding. I love this game. The levels look gorgeous, the themes are fantastic. I love it. I love everything about Alice Madness Returns, and actually, just like Shadow of the Colossus, the thing that first got me interested in it was watching, again, PewDiePie play through it back in the day, and of course he never actually finished it, so I thought, well, he didn't finish it, so I'll buy it myself. I completed it, did a review for it here on the channel as well. I love it. It's a fantastic game. Now moving up into 4th place, I'm putting another game which, in a similar way to The Punisher, is not so much a super deep game, it's more just hyper-violent fun, and this is actually one of the first games that got me interested in that kind of genre, because, as I said, I love monsters, I love horror, this game has that, and then it combines it with almost like the Spider-Man games kind of open world with a huge map, tons of missions, and that is, of course, Prototype. The first game in particular I adore. The graphics don't hold up as well as the second one, but I prefer the character in the first game. He's more interesting, he's more of an anti-hero, whereas in the second game, the character's just more of a typical revenge-seeking thug, or that's the way he's played off as being. But the second game's cool, you get extra powers, different villains, etc. But I just never enjoyed the spark of the second game as much as the first. The first was more original, and the kind of powers that the character in Prototype has, Alex Mercer, they're insane. It's got an incredible character design with the black leather jacket with the white stripes on the sleeves, which I actually own a replica of, with the grey hoodie, the huge arm blades, because for those who are unfamiliar with Prototype, basically you play as a character who doesn't know what happened to him. You just have these crazy powers where you can kind of liquefy parts of your body and turn them into weapons like huge blades or whips or like massive rock hands. It's pretty awesome, but it goes way beyond that. You can run up the side of buildings, you can basically fly, you can glide around, and you can upgrade the character's ability so you get more and more powerful, to the point where eventually you can jump off of a skyscraper, slam into the street, cause a earthquake, essentially, and at the same time explode into like a shower of tendrils which absorbs all life in the vicinity. So again, it's kind of like John Carpenter's The Thing, which is one of the reasons why I love it, but almost like what would happen if The Thing infected Superman. That's kind of like what Alex Mercer is. A basically unkillable virus that happens to wear a hoodie. It's an awesome game. Check out the second one as well if you want to. It's certainly got a lot to like, but I think I prefer the character the most of Alex Mercer in the first one. So most definitely going to get a high place on the list for me. I absolutely love Prototype. Next up, very high in third place. This might surprise some people who have played it, maybe. I did a full playthrough for this game. It's like 5 hours long over 5 episodes. Dead Rising 3. Now, I'm a relative newcomer to the Dead Rising franchise because I played this one first. I often play series and franchises out of order. That's kind of just what I do unintentionally sometimes. So I played the third one, then I played Dead Rising 4, and I own the first and second one, but I've never actually played them. Surprise, surprise. But I did not enjoy the fourth one that much. I don't like the character. He's arrogant, up his own backside, not really a fan. And I don't really like the location as much. It's set around Christmas in a mall, which is just kind of boring to me, and although you can go outside, it just doesn't have a spark. This third game for me, I love it. The main character's kind of a goody two-shoes, which is unnecessary in a zombie apocalypse, but at the same time, I love the kind of 80s colourful flair that the game has, with villains that are based around the 7 deadly sins. They're extremely over the top. The vehicles, the weapons are insane. Again, everything's very colourful and bright and loud and over the top, which I really like. That's kind of the running theme of the games that I enjoy. But at the same time, combined with hundreds of thousands of zombies to kill, which infinitely respawn, creating crazy weapons, unlocking suits. There's a lot of humour in the game as well. I love it. I love the soundtrack as well. It's actually got one of my favourite soundtracks, like 80s synth. If you haven't played Dead Rising 3, it's good arcade-ish fun. It's not a full-on arcade game. It takes some skill at least. But yeah, check it out. If you're a zombie fan, you probably already have, but if you haven't, do so, definitely. I've played through this game probably at least as many times as Tony Hawk Underground 2, because again, you can play through it pretty quick. As I said, about 5 hours for the whole thing. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy this game. I still play it quite often, actually, and it's a lot of fun. Next up was a very difficult decision for me. In fact, first and second place flip-flopped back and forth because I love both of these games, both of these franchises, but ultimately in second place I'm putting Fallout 4. A lot of you guys who have me as a friend on PSN will probably notice that I'm on that game quite a bit. Most of the time that you'll see me on there, I'm on that game, and if I'm on GT Sport, chances are I'm probably recording a video or something. So Fallout 4 is, I think, a perfect game. I know a lot of people prefer the third game. I've played through the whole thing right up until the DLC locked ending, which certainly turned me off the experience. Didn't enjoy Fallout 3 anywhere near as much, to be honest. But Fallout 4 for me, I've played through the entire game once, then I added a ton of mods from the community, which are really easy to install. I like the fact that the mods are actually included as part of the game experience, so you can just toggle them on and off like you would with an options menu. And in effect, the mods turn it into a completely new game. You can make the game as ridiculous or as hardcore as you want. You can turn it into a survival game, or you can just go absolutely crazy with it like I did and have characters flying and running around at like 100 miles an hour and crazy weapons, pistols that shoot nukes out of them, that kind of stuff. But I'm currently playing through the game a second time, now as a female character. First time I played through as the male character, and I'm actually doing missions this time around that I never even unlocked the first time, stuff that I didn't know the first time around. First time I played it, I got up around level 900, still got that game save. At the moment, I'm up around like level 68 again with this second playthrough, so it's a ton of fun. To me, Fallout just never bores me. It's such a huge map. I'm really looking forward to Fallout 76. I don't care for the online aspect at all, but thankfully the experience of the game is apparently, from what I've heard, still as enjoyable offline as it is on, as far as the previous game. So I assume there's still some kind of story in there, but we'll have to wait and see. I was going to buy it day one, but I decided not to because I'm buying, or I've already pre-ordered Forza Horizon 4, and I'm going to be focusing on that. Not on the channel completely, but of course I need the time to get the cars, to do the tunes and reviews. So if I'm going to be doing that most of the time, plus Gran Turismo Sport and a ton of others, I simply won't have the time to play Fallout 76 that much. So what I'm going to do instead is just wait for it to get a bit cheaper. But as far as Fallout 4 goes, I love this game. It's my favourite game of right now, but as far as overall games, there is one other game and one other franchise in particular which I felt I just had to put in first place, and that one is, well, no surprise to anyone who's heard me say this before on the channel, the Arkham Saga. Now, is it cheating to put a whole series in first place? Yes, probably. But at the same time, you could justifiably do that in the comments as well if you wanted to. If you wanted to, for instance, have one of your picks be the entire Call of Duty series, that's fine by me. Because the reason why I'm categorising the Arkham Saga, which is of course the Batman series of games, in my first place pick, is because it's literally one story. All 4 games span one ongoing story over a number of years. And without spoiling anything, Arkham Origins, in particular, is a very undervalued game. It's the one which is made after a couple of the others, and it's made by different people. So the graphics are different, some of the voice actors are different, but at the same time, the reason why I like Origins so much as well is because it gives you a very interesting alternate perspective on the early days of Batman. Because, I don't know, obviously if you're not a Batman fan then the series won't appeal to you, but Batman is probably my favourite hero of comics, definitely my favourite DC character, and I have no doubt that part of the reason why I value this game series so much is because not only do I think it's by far the best Batman portrayal that we've ever seen on anything other than a page, way better than any of the movies. I love the movies, but they don't even come close to how well Batman is portrayed in the game as a truly broken character. But tying into that, I think the reason why I love this franchise so much as well is because of that. I've grown up around a number of people who had mental issues, and the game portrays a broken person very well. Because the movies always present Batman as being a rich, tech-savvy, kind of mopey guy. He's always kind of feeling sorry for himself, almost, as Bruce Wayne, rather than Batman. He's kind of moping around, all my parents died, and we're gonna, where are the drugs going? All that kind of stuff. It's kind of a meme. The movies are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, the character of Batman is always kind of the same. Michael Keaton's kind of crazy, but he's still just Batman. Christian Bale is more of a thug Batman, kind of a ninja as well, but he's still just Batman. They never go full deep dive into the character. And Ben Affleck's just a bodybuilder in a Batman suit. So as far as going into the character, into his mind, that's what the games do so well. And also the relationship that he has with the Joker, which again Origins is so important and instrumental in because he's never met him before. They don't know each other in that Origins game. He meets the Joker for the first time. That is such an important moment and an important arc. But it's Arkham Knight in particular, the last one, because as far as the timeline goes, it's Origins, Asylum, City, and Knight. That's the way the story progresses. And Arkham Knight, the way it culminates on the PS4 or the Xbox One, is outstanding. That game alone, which you can see some of my footage of in this video, is mind-blowing. The attention to detail, the graphics, the fighting style, which everyone knows is so revolutionary from the games, the way it wraps up, and also the moral questions that it asks of you as Batman, of various other characters, and how, far better than any of the movies, it shows that Batman literally is, as the Joker said a number of times, one bad day away from being the Joker. He is only a hero because he's not a villain. It really is as simple as that. He's that close. So I love that. You never get that exploration in any of the movies. He's always just a brooding bodybuilder, in effect, to some degree. In the games, he is so much more than that, and full credit to the writers, the developers, and of course Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman. It's outstanding. Outstanding series, incredible game. You don't even need, to be honest, to be a huge Batman fan to enjoy it, because this series made Batman my favourite character. He wasn't before. So definitely check out the Arkham Saga if you can. It was a toss-up for me between the pure all-round enjoyment of Fallout 4 compared to the more fundamental, almost thought-provoking brilliance of the Arkham games. But to me, that elevated, kind of thoughtful approach that the Batman games have definitely earned it first place. And Fallout 4, as I said, is my favourite game of the moment, because I don't go back to play the Arkham stories again and again, even though you could, whereas with Fallout I do. So overall, that's it for my top 10 favourite games that are apart from the racing world, and as I said, I'd love to hear your picks down below. But that's it for this instalment. Of course, I'll see you guys next week, and again, speaking about racing, stick around on the channel. We're going to be covering a ton of stuff for the new cars coming out in this month's update. But that's it for this pick. As I said, I'll see you next week, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.